On this edition of Native Report, we attend one of the oldest gatherings in Minnesota, the Grand Portage Rendezvous Days powwow.
We meet Norman Descham, chairman of the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa.
And we continue following artist Carl Gawboy as he paints the Starmaiden. We also learn what we can do to lead healthier lives and hear from our elders on this edition of Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Ernie Stevens.
And I'm Rita Aspinwall. Every year during the second week of August, the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa hold their annual powwow. The annual gathering is a time when Grand Portage comes alive and reflects upon its great heritage. Join us now as we experience one of the oldest traditional powwows in northeastern Minnesota.
The beat of the drum and male voices echo across the Grand Portage powwow grounds on this first day of the Grand Portage Rendezvous Days powwow. This is a time of celebration, of reconnecting with family, old friends, and maybe making new ones. This event connects the present to the past.
What I remember both about years ago was my dad always was in the, came in as a vet and raised his brother's flag until, a few years before he passed that he couldn't do it anymore. Grand Portage has so many people that want to come here because it's not a traditional powwow, it's not a contest powwow. We call it a celebration powwow, where we just get together and visit and laugh and talk. And of course the National Monument is involved with the Voyager Brigades down there. I started getting involved with the Rendezvous when I was 16, so it's been many, many years. I've been with the committee from all the way from inside the stockade to the meadow below the Catholic Church to the ball field, and then to here, and then we built here, so it's been kind of all over. It's a lot of preparation, and when Friday comes with the warm-ups, and you can see the smoke all around the community, it gives you a really good feeling that a lot of our relatives and friends are coming back for the weekend, and we haven't seen them, sometimes annually we see them, sometimes it's 2-3 years. And I know my relatives flew in from California. Because families come home to be with their family, we have gotten to where we've hired other tribal members, like from Fond du Lac and Net Lake and so forth, to work in our security, our cleanup, registration, cooking, and that helps. That makes a big family. It just gives you a really nice feeling.
The young people who dance at the powwow do so for a variety of reasons.
Why do you dance?
It's just been something that I've been raised around and never something that I questioned. And I found joy in it. I started singing with my family drum, and then from there I learned the beat, learned the rhythm, and then when I started dancing I could get it down. And so once I started to become familiar with it, it's just something that I've always loved doing and something that I would never want to give up.
I dance for our ancestors and my grandma that passed away. Our tradition is dancing in the drum and dancing. It's like a heartbeat of the drum, so we're dancing to that.
I got into it when I was 12, and ever since then I started dancing. Then I found out I could run for royalty, and I took the chance to run for it, and ever since I've been royalty. I love representing Grand Portage. I've represented Grand Portage for 3 years now. It's good character to our community, and I do whatever I can to help.
At gatherings such as this, individuals are often honored, and Vivian Carlson, an elder from the village, was recognized at this year's celebration.
Honoring Vivian today, it was I think it just touched so many hearts when we give her the roses and the honor dance. It's really, really important in our community to do that. Honoring someone that has done so much for this community and volunteered their time and work with the kids, and it's just an honor to do that. It's kind of hard to explain. We start planning this well, this year we got a little bit late because there was other things involved, but we usually start in March, and we have a committee of about 20 people because we have ball tournaments, we got horseshoe tournaments, turkey shoots. There's just so much involvement, and we've got so many good people that are on the committee that work hard. It's growing every year. It just gets bigger and bigger every year.
Hepato means liver, and itis means inflammation. Hepatitis A is a highly contagious liver infection caused by the hepatitis A virus. There are several viral liver infections, and all can affect your liver's ability to function. Hepatitis A infections are most commonly caused by infected food or water, or by close contact with someone infected by the virus, or by an object that's infected. Mild cases of hepatitis A don't need treatment, and most people who are infected recover completely with no permanent liver damage. Practicing good hand washing and good basic hygiene is the best protection against hepatitis A, and there are vaccines available for those at higher risk. Symptoms usually show up after someone has been infected for a few weeks, and not everyone with hepatitis A gets symptoms. The most common signs and symptoms of hepatitis A include fatigue, nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain, especially under the ribs and the right, clay-colored bowel movements, low-grade fevers, itchy skin, dark urine, loss of appetite, jaundice or yellowing of eyes and skin, and joint pain. Most of the time, these symptoms are mild and last a few weeks. Sometimes this can be a severe infection that lasts for months, and it can rarely progress to liver failure. Getting the hepatitis A vaccine or an injection of an antibody called immunoglobulin within 2 weeks of being exposed to hepatitis A may protect you from infection. You should ask your provider about the vaccine if you've eaten in a restaurant recently that has had a reported hepatitis A outbreak, you have traveled recently to other countries, including Mexico or South or Central America, or to areas with poor sanitation, someone close to you has been diagnosed with hepatitis A, you have had sexual contact with someone infected with the virus. The virus most often spreads from eating or drinking something contaminated with fecal matter, even in tiny amounts. The virus does not spread through coughing or sneezing. Hepatitis A usually does not result in long-term liver damage, and most of the time it's a short-term infection that doesn't become chronic. Hepatitis A can be prevented by a vaccine, and this is given in 2 injections, the initial injection and a booster 6 months later. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends the vaccine for all children at age 1 and older children who didn't receive the vaccine. The vaccine is also recommended for laboratory workers who might come into contact with the virus, men who have sex with men, people who travel to parts of the world where hepatitis A is common, anyone who uses illegal drugs, people who receive treatments with clotting factor concentrates, and anyone with chronic liver disease. If you're concerned about getting hepatitis A, talk to your health provider. And remember to call an elder. They've been waiting for your call. I'm Dr. Arnie Vainio, and this is Health Matters.
Next, Norman Descham has served on the tribal council of the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa since he was 21 years old. He has lived in Grand Portage all his life and knows quite well the important issues of the close-knit community. We caught up with the chairman during some downtime at the reservation's annual gathering and celebration.
The Grand Portage Reservation sits at the very northeastern corner of Minnesota. It shares only one boundary with the state, with Canada to the north and Lake Superior to the east. The enrolled membership numbers nearly 1,200 men, women, and children, about half of whom live on the reservation.
It's a close community, and it's a safe place, and a very tight-knit community, and which it's tight-knit but very friendly. People like living here because the quality of life. We've provided opportunity for people to come back and work, and we're seeing a lot of that. But we're also getting caught up with the issues that everybody else is. Healthcare, we're struggling with paying for healthcare. It's a huge cost, and we live in a very expensive area. I got elected when I was 21 years old for the first time as a council member, committee man.
How long have you been chairman?
About 16 years, plus or minus. I forget after a while. When I first got on, their tribal council really didn't even have an office. I was fortunate to serve a couple of years with John Flatt, who was our hereditary chief. That was a real experience that I'll never forget. He was a wise man. But back then, yeah, it was interesting because most things were pretty much run by outside agencies. A BIA, were real paternalistic at the time. They did everything. They provided the services. The tribal council really didn't have much to say. Public Law 638 changed all that, and since, tribes have asserted themselves and are now, doing all these services themselves. But back then it was a whole different world.
Chairman Descham has lived in Grand Portage all of his life. He and his father hunted, fished, and gathered within reservation boundaries. And he's working with the Reservation Tribal Council to ensure that the resources are there for future generations.
One sad thing about my dad is growing up, subsistence hunting and fishing was really important. And by the time we got our treaty issues settled, he'd passed away. So he always wanted to go hunting hoveling off the reservation. He was never able to do that because he like, a lot of moose over there, but it just never worked out. But yeah, I remember the days we would be setting nets in the spring down here, and at that time, state game wardens actually came on the reservation, so we had to do it undercover at night, but all that has changed. A lot of people have asserted their sovereignty and worked on getting our treaty rights recognized, and so we could practice the way we wanted to, not free of state wardens on the res. Growing up at Grand Portage in those days, there really wasn't anything here, and by anything here I mean opportunities. Opportunity to work year-round, to be able to finance cars and homes and have a future. I think you have those opportunities. I think people, their self-esteem, everything is much better. This is their home. They want to live here. They want to work here. And our job is to facilitate that somehow. I always say that if, my job is to make these things available, and it's up to you to take it and do something with it.
In addition to serving on the Grand Portage RTC, Chairman Descham was president of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe for 12 years.
The Minnesota Chippewa tribe is very unique in the fact that there are 6 member reservations, or bands if you want. I think over the years, the tribe has done the best they can. It's been their philosophy to allow bands more and more authority to run their own affairs on the reservation. That doesn't take away the authority, but it just, some of those local issues need to be handled locally. One of the biggest issues, and I'm just going to mention that because it is an issue, is enrollment. and it's a very emotional issue. People think differently about it, but it has to come from the people. It has to be ground up versus coming from the top.
Another tribal leader the chairman had a good relationship with is the late Stanley Crooks, chairman of the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community.
One thing about Stanley that really impressed me, and everybody knows, they're a very rich tribe, but he never forgot where he came from. I mean, he always down to earth, respected other tribal leaders and other tribal people, and he never forgot that. And did a lot for tribal people as far as helping. We've got a new daycare because of him. He helped finance our trading post, and was very interested in what smaller tribes are doing, how he could help. And he never turned away from that, and I'll always remember that. He was quite a guy. You get to know him on a personal level, and he really wanted to use what they have to help other people. Another person who is no longer here on the government side is a fellow named George Goodwin. He was executive director at MCT at the time when there was a lot of turmoil at that time, and tribes were fighting to establish themselves and to clarify their role with other governments. And I was impressed by George, and he was represented really what I thought tribes should strive for.
You said this is probably your last term on council. What are your hopes then for the community in the future, years down the line here?
Well, I think, that there's a lot of things that have changed in the last 20 years here. And I think I would hope I know we have a lot of younger people who can step forward and protect that and make this place, or keep this place the way it is for their kids, and provide those opportunities. And that's my hope.
My mother was born in Grand Marais, and then they were hauled up to Grand Portage, and that's why she was in Grand Portage. And then my dad, he came from Sweden, and how he met my mother is still unbelievable to me, because when he came across, he landed in New York, and then he got far as Two Harbors, and then he came up to Grand Portage. He was a commercial fisherman, and that's what he did the rest of his life after he met my mom, and they had 5 children. But we didn't have electricity, and we didn't have running water. We had to go down to Lake Superior and haul our water. And that wasn't too bad because we had trails down there, And when mother needed to wash clothes, we could take her boiler down there and push it up, and then she put it on the stove to warm up. And when I got older, I'd say, "I'll get you water." And then I dumped it so I could make ice on the hill, and then we could go sliding.
We followed artist Carl Gawboy over a period of several months as he painted the Starmaiden, a piece of artwork centered on Native American storytelling. Join us now for part 2 as we watch Carl bring together art, history, culture, and astronomy in a painting that is truly epic.
The solitude Carl Gawboy enjoys in his studio enables him to concentrate unencumbered by outside distractions as he continues painting the Starmaiden. His inspiration for this painting? The Ojibwe stories he heard as a boy.
I didn't hear all of them. Some of the illustrations are from research that we've done. A couple of the sources are considered to be pretty good sources. One is the Jones collection, which is in Ojibwe and English. And then there's a few around here that are pretty good sources too. Sister Bernard Coleman interviewed people at Fond du Lac Reservation and at Leech Lake, and they're considered to be pretty good, reliable sources. A lot of the people who write children's books or write educational curriculum use texts like that in order to create modern retelling of these stories. there was a great story, and I think this was from the Jones texts, about how Nanabuju, the great culture hero, brought medicine to the people. And because I paint realistically, by the time this little drawing was done, there was something so biblical about it. He was talking to an assembled crowd, and there was the sick and lame that were coming to be cured. Does that sound familiar? I was struck by the similarity of a biblical story. And then when I thought about it, I said, well, of course it would come out to be comparable, because it's the same thing. It's a person with great mythical powers who are coming to heal the sick. It was quite a powerful experience when I realized how similar that was to the Christian Bible.
Karl does not consider himself to be a storyteller in the literal sense of the word. Yet, by depicting these stories, he's keeping the storytelling tradition alive.
Doing visual representation like I do is something new. Myths, stories, legends, history, where do these definitions separate from each other? So there's magical events that happen. And a mythical figure then is a person who's capable of changing form, of defeating his enemies by magic. So my doing them realistically is just a whole new way of telling the story. Because when I heard the stories, it was verbal in English, because my father did not speak Ojibwe to us. That's kind of a long story there, but that situation is shared by many families of my generation. But he loved to tell stories, and he'd tell the stories in English. So I heard them in English, and then I imagined them the way that I ended up painting them, like a Hollywood movie, like a clearly focused photograph. And that's the way I thought of them. The Canadian artists, especially, paint myths symbolically. And that's a big difference. It's wonderful to study the Canadian artists. They're called the woodland style, because they predominantly paint myth. They don't do historical figures. They paint mythical figures. And they're famous for that X-ray vision that they use, where you can see into the body of the animal or the mythical figure. I don't know why I never latched on to any of these styles that other Ojibwe were painting. I mean, when I was growing up, Patrick Desjardins was a real famous artist, and I didn't paint like him either. And I guess it was because I was so stubborn and independent, I wanted to do and develop my own style.
The story of the Starmaiden has been told for generations, but this was a story that Karl discovered later in life.
There's been some juvenile books that have been written using that myth. It's appeared in educational curriculum, but one of the versions that I heard came from a friend of mine who had gone to Canada, and he had kind of a teacher there, and he heard a Canadian version of that story. All of these stories have slightly different versions of it. A different version might appear 10 miles down the road. I should mention that even the Bible stories didn't agree with each other until a whole group of people got together under the auspices of the Pope and decided which story was going to be the one that was going to be in the final version and which were going to be the apocryphal books, the ones that they were going to set aside. The Greeks did the same thing. Every single valley in Greece had a different story of Greece and Mercury, and of Zeus and Mercury and Demeter, and all of these stories are just different from each other. So I hope the Ojibwe never do that. That is, I hope we never get a pope that's going to decide which story is the right one, because the variety should be treasured.
You know, for every story, I was always told that there's a teaching for every story.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be the teaching behind the Starmaiden?
I think because, we live in a universe that's much bigger than us. That's one thing. And the other thing is that a kind of a cosmic female should decide that our way of life is something that should be preserved and something that should be respected is a part of the story. So all the reasons why she liked this part of the country was because of the Ojibwe and how they lived here. And so that meant that a young person hearing that story for the first time would have to fix in their mind, what are the values of these things that we do? Wild racing, fishing, hunting. And what are the, why should they be preserved? And what are the positive aspects of our relationship to the environment that should be preserved?
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us on the web at nativereport.org, on Facebook, and on Twitter.
Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors across Indian Country. I'm Rita Aspinwall.
And I'm Ernie Stevens. Join us next time for Native Report.
Rita Aspinwall is an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and is an ICWA social worker with Fond du Lac Social Services. Ernie Stevens is a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and is a film and television producer. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.